You get to look forward to the best sex of your life in your 40s, 50s, and 60s. We keep thinking that sex is for the young and the beautiful. But, by the time we're hitting the middle of our life, we know ourselves a little better. And hopefully we're not trying to look perfect because we've given up on that quest. It's too hard.
Today we're talking about sex, baby, and I don't mean the song. I mean sex in midlife and why it's different to other stages of life, how our bodies change and impacts our libido and interests, and how to communicate what you actually want. Our guest today is Tanya Koens, a somatic sex therapist and sexologist.
Here's Pod O'Sullivan with Don't Let the Old Man In, a podcast from the Wisdom Vault.
Tanya, welcome to our podcast. Great to see you.
Yes, thanks so much for having me on. It's lovely to be here.
Well, this is a first. It's definitely first for me, and I suspect it's a first for many of our listeners. You are a nationally famous and admired clinical and somatic sex therapist and sexologist. And I have to admit, I've never spoken to someone like you before, so I can't wait to have a conversation.
Well, I promise I won't bite, and I think we'll have a lot of fun too.
I'm sure we will. Before we jump into it, tell us what our listeners are likely to get or learn from our conversation today.
Ooh, a lot of things, I think. Sometimes I don't know what I know, so it'll be interesting to see where we go. But I think our listeners might get a bit of an insight into the things that get in the way of pleasure and connection, what sex and intimacy looks like over a lifespan, and what you yourself can do to promote pleasure and intimacy in your life.
Well, if that's not a conversation that everybody will be interested in, I don't know what is. Let's jump straight into the first word, pleasure. You call yourself a pleasure alchemist, which I've never heard before. Tell me about that notion and why is it important to you?
It's really interesting because I think when I started my studies around sex, I sort of, when you go to university, you learn the sort of physical side of things. And then when you're studying it academically and you're talking to people, you realize that sex is more, it's not just physical, it's relational, it's emotional, it's political, it's radical, it's spiritual, it's very many things. And pleasure is a big part of this. And in the course of studying this and in the course of also studying trauma, because that overlaps, I was learning about how people are oppressed via their bodies. So the way that oppression works is you make somebody's body not okay in some kind of way. So it could be their gender, it could be their size or shape, it could be their skin color or their sexual orientation. But we make something that's fundamentally who they are not okay. And then people are struggling for the rest of their lives to try and be something that they're not. And it really, really gets in the way of pleasure. And in the studying of this and understanding, how everything's working and how most of us are struggling to thrive in a world that's not set up for us to thrive, I really realized that pleasure is a great measure of well-being, right? If we're just here working and sleeping, what are we doing? Yeah. But the amount of pleasure that we have in our life could be a real indicator of how well we are thriving and how successful we actually are. So I call myself a pleasure activist because I want people to access pleasure. It's a part of their well-being.
That's a very interesting angle I had never thought about before. That's really cool. So as I said in my introduction, you are a nationally renowned and one of the most experienced sex therapists in Australia. What do people come to you for?
Lots and lots of things. I see all sorts of folks and all sorts of relationship dynamics. So single folks come and see me, people in relationships, people in couples, thruples, more. People come to me sometimes because things are not working. Something might be broken. So that might be some physical things like erectile dysfunction or premature ejaculation or inability to orgasm. Sometimes the most common presenting couple issue is mismatched libido. So somebody would like more sex or different sex than the other. But also people come to me because they want to learn and they want to maybe explore things that are new, or they want to understand why things are going well and could be better or haven't been going well. So it's a lot of things, actually. It's not just one.
And is that initiated by one partner or more than the other partner?
That can really depend. I think the sweetest appointments that I get are mums that ring up because they want their sons to come in because their sons are so anxious about sex. Yeah. I'm just like, oh my Lord, you've spoken to your son and you're actively trying to help. I'm like, your son actually has to book the appointment. You can't do that. Like, I need consent. But it's really great you've done the research, and he's terribly welcome to come along, and we can have a chat about things that will allay anxiety. Sometimes it's one partner wanting to help the other out. Sometimes it's a family member. Sometimes people have heard. Sometimes folks heard me on the radio or read an article, and they're like, that girl sounds like someone I'd like to speak to.
Wow, okay. And from a midlife perspective, as you know, our audience are more in the midlife spectrum of life. Is there any patterns that you see for folks who come to you?
Trying to work out relationships where sex has gone off the menu or it's more difficult to get to sex. Also, people where kids are leaving, kids are more independent, so they're not so caught up in parenting, and they've had a kind of break from intimacy and wondering how they can come back together. There might be problems. Also, aging bodies. I think a lot of the time people in midlife expect their bodies to perform like in their early 20s, and that's going to lead to confusion and disappointment.
Well, there's three. That sounds like three big topics we can jump into right there. There's a scene in it's an old, but it was a well-known Woody Allen movie from, I don't know, 2 or 3 decades ago, where a couple are going to see therapists, and you see the different conversations. And in this case, it was a husband and wife couple, and the wife is with the therapist first, and the therapist asks her, how often do you guys have sex? She goes, all the time, 3 times a week. And then the next thing you see the husband being asked the same question. He goes, hardly ever, 3 times a week. And
Brilliant.
it kind of epitomizes the mythology around men and women and desire and their perception around that. And you mentioned mismatched libido and desire discrepancy, and I've heard you on the radio talk about desire discrepancy. Tell us about that, how it shows up, what's the impact?
It's interesting because it's the most common presenting couples issue, but it's not a cut and dried issue. There are lots and lots of reasons why people's desire can be affected. And I talk to people about this. Sometimes there's a natural low libido. Sometimes people aren't that interested in sex. There are people that sit at the sort of asexual end of the spectrum, and there are some people that sit at the hypersexual end of the spectrum where they can't control their impulses. And most of us sit somewhere in the middle, and we need to understand that our libidos are constantly going up and down like this. Yeah. So we want to be kind of like a dolphin, up and down, up and down, up and down like this. Not the breaching whale, because that's a lot. Right? So we want to understand what it is that works for us. And we also need to remember that our partner is not often in sync with us. So their libido is fluctuating, our libido is fluctuating. So we have that. But then we also have what are our expectations around sex. And that Woody Allen example was beautiful, right? Because what is a lot of sex to somebody is not a lot of sex to someone else. So we want to have a look at where the overlap is. I'm often working with people, and I'm like, we have a one of these and a one of those, and we want to look at where the overlap is, because that's where the magic happens. It's not about making people right or wrong. In fact, you can both be right. It's more about working out what works for you and where you're both happy. So when I'm talking to couples, I ask them questions like, how much sex would you like to be having? But I ask them to answer the question twice. Once in an ideal world. So an ideal world is a really great world where we're not stressed, we're not having interferences. It's a good day, week, month, year. We don't live in a porn film. It's just we're not having any interference. So how much sex would you like to be having? And then in a good enough world, this is what I need to survive. Right? So we're trying to find the stretch. And asking couples this is fascinating because it's similar to the Woody Allen example. I had a lovely couple come in once, and the wife answered first, and she said, I would like to have sex 2 or 3 times a week, but good enough is once. And then the husband came on. He said, I would like to have sex 7 times a week, daily. And she was taking a sip of her water as he got to the good enough. And he said, but good enough would be once a week. And she went and sprayed her water. She said, that's not true. You're always asking me. And he's like, yes, I know, darling, but I'm working on the ratios. And I was like, wow. Oh. So we had this great...
Oh, well, he's an optimist.
Yeah, but we had a really great conversation when we worked out what it was that they liked. There didn't have to be a constant badgering and asking. They could be like, hey, this is a good time of the week. Why don't we plan to stick our elbows out and make some time for ourselves? So it became fun and playful rather than can we? which got irritating for the person who didn't want to every day.
You mentioned our libidos fluctuate, and that's normal. What are some of the causes of that?
Sometimes there's natural cycles. I mean, so we have childbirth. So when a woman has a child, their desire will go down because think back to caveman times. You're not supposed to be getting busy with your caveman partner while a saber-tooth tiger can come and eat your babies. So you will always have an ear out. And also you're getting a lot of touch needs met by a baby. So that desire does come back up, but never quite to the level that it was before children. So there's that happening in women, and also monthly cycles and hormones. But things like stress, depression, anxiety, they can flatline people's libidos. And we live in a very stressful world. So when people are having work stress or family stress, or they're worried about things that are important to them, it can really affect their willingness to be sexual and wanting to, and their ability to in some cases. And other things like relationships. If your relationship's not traveling very well, it's not very sexy. So people sort of lose the interest and the willingness to want to connect with their partner.
A quick pause. Hope you're enjoying this. We are so lucky on this podcast. We have great guests who share fantastic information. But I want to make sure you're getting the best value. So I've put together a small episode of exactly what to do based upon what our guest is saying and why it works. Here's the research behind it. It's a short episode. You're going to love it. It's released 2 days after this. Have a listen and let us know what you're implementing and how it worked for you.
Does the opposite also happen? Like when your relationship is not going well, people use sex as the only reason to stay in a relationship?
Sometimes people use it as a salve. Like if we can keep our really good connection here, then maybe it's going to help us in other areas. Some people have sex to feel close, and some people need to feel close to have sex. So it's really a matter of finding out what works for your partner. I'm always about what beliefs, what meaning do you give to sex? We need to understand what that is, because it's often very different within the couple dyad.
Now, you said something I think that's probably, like, it really hit me as you said it. That could be very profound. Some people have sex in order to feel close.
Yeah.
And some people have to feel close in order to have sex.
100%.
Is that what you said?
Yeah. It's often generalized to men and women, but I find that it's not helpful to gender anything when it comes to desire and libido, because it puts a lot of pressure on people. Some folks want more sex than other folks. That's okay. Some people need certain conditions in order to feel sexy and relaxed. That's okay. Some people need certain objects or things to arouse. And then there's the reasons why people have sex. Some people have it to feel close and safe. I read what I was studying, so it's a while ago now, the top reasons that women gave to have sex. And the first one was for pleasure. That is good. The second one was to stop their partner asking. I was like, wow, that's not very sexy reading it in an academic sense, but also looking at the comments and things like that, it was like, okay, so maybe they didn't want, they weren't initiating as much as their partner, but they did that sometimes to keep the peace. But sometimes it's like, okay, I need to stop this happening so that we can be okay and be good. Other reasons were financial security, feeling close. There are a lot of reasons. So it's not everybody doesn't have sex for the same reasons.
So therefore, if using what you've just said, then given the huge variety of reasons, if I'm feeling financially secure or I'm okay, my relationship is set, and all those reasons that you gave as potential reasons, that might just explain why some people want less sex than their partner, because all those reasons are satisfied, and therefore the reason to have sex from a sex perspective is not that strong.
It depends, because you've got your biological drive, so there's two kinds of desire. There's spontaneous, and that's what we see in the movies and on TV, where you get a tingling in your loin and you want to jump on top of your partner, or you find someone unbelievably sexy. Yeah. And that's always what's happening at the beginning of a relationship in the period that we call limerence. So limerence is when you meet a new partner and your skin hits their skin and goes, oh, somebody new. And we're hardwired to find a mate. So we get this flush of hormones that happens in the body. So blinkers go up. You don't see that they burp and they fart and they leave the lid off the toothpaste. You're interested and interesting, and it's that lovely falling in love energy. And it's, like, you hang up, no, you hang up, that stuff, right? That's limerence. It's gorgeous. But it only tends to last for 6 to 24 months for most couples. Some people can wang it out to 36.
Okay.
Yeah. So in that time, it's easy to get to sex and to be experimental, right? But then it goes, no more hormones, and you don't get that again unless you get a different human being, right? You can't recreate that. Oh, it doesn't just happen automatically in your long-term relationship. So what you find is you're in a relationship and you need to work at your intimate life. And I think lots of folks know that we need to work at our connection and our relating and our communication. But they do seem to think that you ride off into the sunset and shag happily ever after, right? It's not the case. You've got to really work at that intimate life as well to make sure it's happening.
And you said that lasts for 6 to 24 months.
Yeah, generally. Some people can have it for 36. Yeah. Yeah, so it's
So this whole notion of when we meet first and we're heavily in lust, that's what we're talking about. That 6 to 24 months phase.
yeah, that's the helping us find a partner really, because it's keeping us connected. But then, so spontaneous desire tends to sort of go down over a long-term relationship. But we do have responsive desire. So that's where you might be sitting on the sofa reading a book and your partner comes up and nuzzles your neck and says, "Hey, babes, you're super cute today." And you might be like, "Oh, I wasn't thinking about sex, but that might be fine." Yeah. Or it might even be deciding to have sex because we want to stay close and we want to be close and intimate with each other. Or we said we'd try that thing on Friday night while the kids were out. So even though I don't have the tingling in my loins, I do think it's a good chance to go and do that. And 9 times out of 10 people arouse and they have a very good time.
You have talked, and I've read some of your articles where you talk about, and I think this might be just where you're getting to now about the Friday night. You talked about scheduling sex as a good thing. Not necessarily for everybody, but you said overall, it's a good thing. Now, that talks against spontaneity. So can you just talk about the difference between scheduling and spontaneity and what that means?
Well, the scheduling is about prioritizing sex. I think so many people believe that whole sort of limerence trope of sex should always be spontaneous and I should feel horny all the time and desire my partner all the time. Sometimes we don't. Sometimes your partner might not be behaving very well that day, or you might not be behaving well, or things might be happening. Sometimes life gets in the way. I always say to people, if you've got small children, your sex life takes a hit because there are other things taking away and distracting from you. So the decision, I think, it's how much sex do we want to be having? Let's discuss this as a couple, because there is no right amount. It's what you two decide. I don't care what the neighbors are doing or what your friends are doing or what you've read in the media. It's about what works for you. So you work that out. And then how do we make that happen? So I'm really interested in the world that we live in now. People are busy. Yep, diaries are full. And I'm interested because you will write in your diary drinks after work. You will write in your diary my parents are visiting. You will write in your diary take the kids to football practice. But you don't write in the diary, let's have some time for ourselves. Right? So it's very easy to suddenly look at the week and go, I'm tired and there's no time for us. And weeks and weeks and weeks can go past. So this scheduling, it's not a thing to use to guilt people into sex, because I think some people can use that incorrectly. And so it's Wednesday, you've got to stump up. That's not the idea of it at all. In fact, when I'm coaching folks for this exercise, I say, why don't we put some time in the diary? And we're not going to say what it is. I call it planning to be spontaneous, right? So we're going to put something in our diary and we're going to do something intimate that involves some sort of physical touch. It could be this week you give me a massage, and next week I'll give you one. It could be let's take a bath together, or I'll wash your back in the bath and while we drink wine together. It could be naked TV night. Yeah, it could be let's watch TV with our hands down each other's pants and we can wiggle our fingers in the ad break, whatever it is. And that narrows the gap to getting to sex and intimacy. So you might get there, but if you don't, you've done something that connects you as a partnership that you wouldn't do with your best friend, right? And that's the important part, because we do need that physical connection as we're going on over the years. And what it looks like and how it changes is fine.
Before we recorded today, you and I have talked about a range of people that you've trained with, or various people that you know, and one of those that I've listened to as part of my, prepping for our conversation today was Esther Perel.
Oh, yeah.
And she talked about the distractions that are getting in the way of, which is what I think you're talking about, distractions that get in the way of normal flirting that leads to spontaneity, a couple of hours later. And as I heard you've been on maybe some TV show, but she was talking about when she was younger, and she's probably the same age as me, you come home from work, you're cooking dinner together, there's one television in the room, and it might have 2 channels on it. And basically you're spending 3 or 4 hours together, flirting over the meals, whatever, and for the end of the night. So as opposed to today, when you come home, you've got the iPad, you've got your phone, you've got your Apple Watch, you've got 3 or 4 screens going.
Yeah.
By the time
Yeah.
the TV show's finished, you're both just asleep.
Absolutely.
And so that notion that you're talking about is, this schedule, some planned spontaneity kind of overrides all of that distraction.
That's it. Because when I'm coaching couples for that, I'm like, you can have the stereo, no TV, no watches, phones, laptops, iPads, none of that. It's time. I had a couple that took that on board very seriously, and they said, okay, we're going to create Zen night once a week where there's no devices. And both of them had busy careers where they had to be out after hours and corporate entertainment or working, doing different things. But Zen night was not negotiable, and they would share a meal. They had a spa, so they would take a little spa. They might have a glass of wine, and maybe they got to sex and maybe they didn't, but it was their time for them and for intimacy. And it worked really well, allocating that time. That was not negotiable. People were not allowed to book dates on spa night, or if they did, there had to be another spa night or Zen night in that week.
What did they report was the benefit outside of potentially having sex together?
Feeling closer. They felt closer and they felt more like a unit. Yeah, because again, when we're running around and busy out in the world being ourselves, it's lovely to have a soft place to crash and to fall when you come back, and a supportive partner that you feel close to, not someone you're at war with because things aren't happening.
You mentioned kids earlier on, and you mentioned when you have young kids, they take priority. I certainly remember that. But you also said when your kids are older or have left home, that opens the door to new ways of thinking or new ways of being. Say more to that.
Yeah, that's something that's been a surprising learning over this career, I think, is that people reach a certain age and they're like, oh, I want to dip back into feeling sexy, and maybe I know my body a bit more and I know my partner. What else can we do? We might have worked out sort of things that we can do, but we've heard about other things like Tantra or BDSM or all sorts of things that are out there. So they want that they're the people that come to me saying, how do I explore doing this? I think 50 Shades of Grey, much as I hate the book, really unleashed this sort of maelstrom of like kinky activities that are normalized almost different forms of erotic play, and that people have wanted to take on, which is really great. And wherever you are in Australia, there are places that you can go and learn to do that stuff safely. I very much advocate for do your research, read some books, do a workshop, so you can learn because there's a whole menu of things. So you might do something very, very lightly, or you might want to go down to the S&M club every week and get a thoroughly big spanking. Who knows? It's up to you to sort of explore that. But how do you give permission? How do you sell that into your partner? Some people like to open their relationship up. That comes with a whole set of things that needs considering. Other people like to try more tantric stuff where we're going to look at breath and intention and sort of more an energetic exchange and see what we can do there, like tease each other and learn how to edge and have sex for a really long time because we've been having it so perfunctorily while we've had kids. So it's how are we investing in our relationship and what could we explore together that would make things different or more interesting.
I imagine the desire discrepancy that you mentioned earlier on, or the different versions of libido, or indeed adventurism, could play out in less than positive ways from an exploration perspective here.
Yeah, I do a lot of work. One of my supervisors was Dr. Sandra Patot, and she wrote a book about when your sex drives don't match. And she did her PhD research she created different sexual personality types. It's interesting because when you think about outside of the bedroom, some of us are sporty, some of us are academic, some of us are creative. We've all got kind of the types of folk we are, and it's the same in the bedroom. Some people are really erotic and passionate. They want to explore lots of new things. For some, that can be fluffy handcuffs, a scarf, and a hotel room once a year. For others, it can be leather, whips, and chains, right? So there's a spectrum within each category. Some people sex is more about eye contact and skin contact and feeling close. Other people, it's all about their own pleasure. It's not about the other person, right? That's what turns them on. Some people are really stressed about sex. Some people really get off on their partner's pleasure and they're not really interested in their own so much. So there are all these different personalities. Some people need sex for validation and stress relief, right? So it's pretty hard when you say no to one of those people because they think the sky is falling and you don't love them and everything's really terrible. When other people, if you say no, they're like, sure, I'll ask you again on the weekend. No sweat. So we've got to sort of look at the thoughts, beliefs, and meanings that everybody has towards sex and connection so that we can understand what's going on in your relationship and where we need to understand each other better.
Quick break. I hope you're enjoying the conversation with Tanya. I certainly am. In the next couple of weeks, I'm interviewing a professor of nutrition to talk about why eating more might be the best thing for us. I'm talking to a specialist in positive psychology about how to be happy. And I'm talking to a dating expert about how to start dating in midlife. If you have any specific questions you'd like me to ask, drop them into the comments and I'll grab those, or go to our website and leave them there. In the meantime, back to the show.
Where does someone start? So I'm in my mid-50s. The kids are gone from home. Got a lot more time. I want to reconnect or connect again or stronger with my partner, as opposed to follow a pathway that might lead to a separation. And then that often hits a midlife, the question on where are we? So how do I start the conversation with my partner about, we seem to have drifted apart connection-wise and sexually, and I'd like to not go down that route any longer.
Some curiosity first. Like, I'm really curious as to, how we find ourselves here when we used to be like this. What gets in the way? What do you think gets in the way for us connecting in an intimate way? So sitting down and having a bit of a chat with each other about that. And then when you hear those responses, being kind and generous as well. Let's not bar humbug or say it's not like that. It's like, oh, okay, I had no idea that you were feeling like that. So a lot of people, their body shape has changed. So there might be shame around body image, sexuality, performance, so dealing with the aging part is a big component, I think, in folks. People tend to avoid rather than deal with or talk about what it is that's getting in the way, right? So if we can have some of these more tricky conversations, and really everything comes back to communicating. The more we can communicate, the more pleasure we're going to have, right? I talk a lot about consent being important in long-term relationships as well as at the beginning, because it's an exponential increaser of pleasure when you create safety and people feel okay.
You mentioned our bodies changing. Midlife brings many, many changes. What typically happens from a body perspective that might surprise us or maybe even disappoint us as we start to come to terms with who we are in our 50s or late 40s or early 60s?
Yeah. It's funny because when I was very first starting out, I had a lovely teacher who said, Tans, you get to look forward to the best sex of your life in your 40s, 50s, and 60s. And I was like, right on, sister. That's a really good message to hear, right? Because we keep thinking that sex is for the young and the beautiful. But, by the time we're hitting the middle of our life, we know ourselves a little better. And hopefully we're not trying to look perfect, because we've given up on that quest. It's too hard. We've got other things to do, and we can love ourselves and our bodies. I've got, I think it's up here. It says all bodies are capable of experiencing the pleasure that they can enjoy, right? You can have how your body looks doesn't have any bearing on whether you can experience pleasure. So the things that we do have to take into account are maybe we have some pain or some issues. Maybe we have some functioning issues. So it's quite normal for men to have a softening of erections as they get older, but they don't know that. So if they run into that, there can be a real, what's happening? Does this mean that sex or intimacy or my genitals doing what I would like them to do, is that over forever? And I'm like, no, it's not. But we have to sort of fold in aging. It's like if you played tennis all your life, I'm pretty sure you're factoring in how your body's changing as you're playing tennis over the decades. Yeah. So it's kind of the same. It's like maybe the things that we did. And also, we don't always like the same thing for 20 years. We might change. So things that really worked for us in early days might be boring now. And we might like to do things that are a bit more gentle or a bit more exploratory, or just a little bit different in our bodies. So being curious about what feels nice and what's good is a really good starting point for people. And being curious about what gets in the way of us feeling sexy is also another really healthy conversation to be having.
Going back to my earlier point about at midlife, we often separate and restart and look for new relationships. I would imagine coming out of a long-term relationship and then starting to date,
Yeah.
there's a whole new world out there that could be very, very exciting. It could be very illuminating. It could be very eye-opening. I imagine it could be pretty scary as well. Talk to me about some of the experiences you've had or some of the stories you've heard from your clinic room of folks who are, on that journey now.
Yeah, it's all of the things that you said. It is very exciting. I think one of the things, the first thing that happens when people are splitting up is the silver lining is like, oh, I could go out and have some adventures. Maybe they hadn't been having sex for a while, or their partner didn't like the things that they did. So they're like, hooray, maybe I can go out and do that. Then there's this big realizing like, oh, how do I go out there and do that? Because often people have been in a relationship for 20 years or more, and the dating landscape's really changed in that time. Yeah. So there's what's appropriate and what's okay. And so I think this is where men in particular have difficulties, because there's a whole different change in the nuances around consent and what is that and why it's important, and how we're educating young men today. And it's really different to how the men who are in their middle age now were brought up and taught about sex. So they're having to negotiate things that are really alarming and upsetting and scary for them, and it doesn't feel so safe, right? So it's really good for them to get a bit of a grounding on what's different, what does that mean? Because we're often taught our sex education's woefully lacking. So we just basically taught that sex is one of these, and this happens, and you put a condom on this to not make a baby or not get a disease. We never focus on the pleasure of this guy, so people don't understand this so much, and that's really important to being a good lover, making lasting connections and understanding. And we also talk about sex, or we have spoken about sex, in terms of men being the subject and women being the object. So we're supposed to be sexy, but not sexual, and men are supposed to get it or take it from us. And that's not helpful. But I see so many men floundering because they're like, I don't know, like I've been told to be a provider and to give advice and to be protective and to do all of these things. And women are like, no, don't open the door for me. I can pay. And they're just like, I don't know what to do. And so I'm coaching them on how to ask, sort of say, are you open for an opinion? Or would you like me to open the door for you? Or would you like me to pick up the tab? So gentle ways of asking for consent that they've never heard in their language before or never had to think about, and not understanding the privilege they've had of safety because they've been so centered that they've been safe in these interactions. And now that we're asking them to think about these things, we're inviting them to join the rest of the world in discomfort around sex and intimacy. And that's really difficult for people who've never felt discomfort in that area.
Can I throw in more complexity to what's already very complex, given what you've said? Just want to go back to something you quoted earlier in a conversation. You said, I can't remember which it was, someone who'd done their research where they'd asked a whole lot of women about why they want sex and financial security, and there was a whole lot of reasons they gave. Does that show up in dating, second half of life, post long-term relationship? And if so, how does that add to the complexity?
I think that study was done about people in long-term relationships. So dating's a bit different because you're courting. So a lot of people are hopeful, and this is where you need to be able to communicate well. Like, what is it that you're looking for? And that's a tricky question to ask when somebody's online going, what are you up for? It's like, I don't know, most of us need to smell the other person to see if there's kind of like a vibe, the pheromone test.
Yeah.
But also, sometimes we don't know. Often we don't know. And it's okay to not know. But how do we have conversations where we're constantly checking in? I was just making, before we're chatting, I'm running a course on consent, and I made a reel talking about the global phenomenon, heated rivalry, the story about two hockey players that on opposing teams that fall in love. So it's a queer love story. And women around the world are, clutching their pearls and their ovaries going, oh my God, because it shows consent and negotiation. It shows that it's okay to say, I don't know. It shows that it's okay to say, not now, and the point won't be pushed. It shows that people can wait for what they want to do. It shows men being vulnerable, and it's really quite something in a world that, and in a hockey world where men are supposed to be strong, tough, masculine, and not get upset. So the dialogue is really fascinating. And I'm looking at that thinking, wow, here are two people negotiating also that it's not okay to be doing what they're doing, like they're arch rivals. It's so not what people would expect. So they're having to make their own sense of it, but they also need to communicate with each other whilst keeping themselves safe. That's a pretty interesting thing for people to be looking at, because isn't dating about that? You know, how do I date? How do I put myself out there? How do I feel vulnerable? How do I choose somebody that's going to honor that I feel vulnerable, but I still want to be masculine or feminine, whatever we are, however we want to present in that. I want to be true to myself and seen, but I don't want to look weak. I don't want to look scared. I don't want to be vulnerable. I don't want to look like I don't know what I'm doing. Yet we are all of these things. And I think we should be able to invite them in rather than fight them.
So can I bring it down to real basics here? So for the man listening to this who is come out of a long-term relationship, maybe recently, maybe a couple of years ago, but is now starting to date, there might be, as you already alluded to, concerns about body changing. There might be a history in the relationship that he's just left or come out of or was pushed out of, whatever, where there was no sex for quite a while. He might be concerns about performative type concerns he might be holding for himself. And now he's starting to date and he's met someone, and the opportunity or the experience is moving towards, hey, potentially we're going to have sex tonight.
Yeah.
And it's a minefield, as you just said. Give us some real basic phrases or questions or just something for that man to be aware of in that opportunity.
Okay. So I think one is stating an intention. So, my intention is to get to know you tonight. I'm really interested in your pleasure and what would make things nice and enjoyable for you. Now, a lot of people can't answer that question straight. So it's being curious. If they say, I don't know, it's like, is this okay? Would it be okay if I did this? If you're worried about your own performance, put it out there. Just say, I'm nervous. It's been a while since I've done this. I've just come out of a relationship, or I've been out of a relationship now for a period of time and I haven't been with anyone. So I know sometimes things might not go according to plan. That said, I've got a lot of ideas for things that we could do. Like, it's not all about this, right? I need to explain to people that this is intercourse. It's not sex. Sex is kissing, touching, oral sex, genital manipulation, touching, massage, all sorts of things. There's so many things. So it doesn't have to be only this, and you're not failing if this doesn't happen or doesn't go well. Broaden your expectations for connection. Learn about pleasure for your partner. So many folks don't know how vulvas arouse, how their desire works, what they need to be ready to invite somebody in. The people who own them and the people who play with them don't understand. So it's getting a little bit of education and understanding. That's going to put you in really good stead with whoever you are. So understanding what happens and then inviting conversation or checking in, like, would it be okay? Are you up for this? Would you like to try this? And if things don't go well, I've got to pivot, how about I do this? Or how about we do that?
That talks to a degree of comfort in terms of relaxation to enable all that.
Yeah. And, what anxious people tend to avoid, don't they? So imagine two people sort of anxiously vibrating, going, oh, we're going to get naked. I really want to, but I'm so nervous.
Yeah.
Most of us, I think.
And alcohol may or may not help in that case.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I'm just like, please don't drink a lot. It's not your friend, particularly as you get older. It's not your friend.
Tanya, what's your view on the impact of pornography? It's just so freely available and it's so performative, as you said earlier on. What's your view from a midlife perspective in terms of how influenced or not we are by it?
Please don't use porn as sex ed is the first thing I say. I think porn is made. I always think about Dan Savage. He's a gay American sex commentator, and he always says that porn is made by angry white men who can't get laid. And I'm like, dude, I think that's right, because it doesn't show. It doesn't show negotiation. It doesn't show normal everyday bodies. It doesn't show people being kind to each other. It definitely doesn't show respect for women. It's quite often violent. There's a general assumption these days for men of all ages that women like choking. I'm like, where did this come in? And it's come in from porn. So I think there are not healthy ideas and tropes. I really understand that there's fantasy, and what porn is adult fantasy, and it's there for a purpose. Often people use it to get off or to spend some sexy time on their own. There's nothing wrong with that. Things we think about in our head are not necessarily the things we want to do. If we want to do some of the things we see in the porn, we need to check in with our partner or potential partners. Is this okay with you? Is this something that you would like? I read there was a global conference in Sexology in Brisbane last year, and a lovely lady in New Zealand had done some research on women who were being choked without consent from Tinder dates, like bringing guys home and suddenly finding they were choked. And some of the stories that were told were women were choked to being passed out, not once, but 2 or 3 times. And I was quite distressed listening to it, going, wow, where's the negotiation in this? Where is being able to say no? Because also there's another thing where women think that men want to do what's in the porn, so they can't object or they can't say no. But you can. If something doesn't feel right, then it isn't. That's my mantra, generally. So asking, because it's okay. If you like choking, that's fine. Some people really like it and it's great, but not everybody does. Not everybody likes, there's not one thing that everybody really likes. We're all erotic snowflakes, and we need to remember that. So the things that you might like might be different from things I might like.
Did you just say we're all erotic snowflakes?
Yes, I
Is that
did.
the phrase you used?
Yeah.
I love that.
We really are, aren't we? We're so very...
I've never heard it before. It's fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah, that one's me. That I coined that term because I think, snowflakes are all unique and very, very individual. And I think we are too. So yes, there are trends of things that people like. Yes, there are things that your body might arouse to, but people can be aroused to the most amazing things.
So curiosity is the enabler for all of that then?
Yeah, totally. And I think, being honest, what I'm often doing with men is saying, put it out there to the people you're going to sleep with, right? If you have got somebody that's not going to be understanding that you might have some issue with your performance or that you're nervous, maybe that's not the right person for you to be getting naked with, right? Because you really want someone that you can feel comfortable with and relax and take it easy and have a nice time. If you fear that someone's going to laugh at you or be angry at you, possibly they don't deserve to get to be naked with you. Right? To think about, to reframe it. It's not like you have to come in and be a manly man and do all of the things and tick all of the boxes. There are your needs in there as well. So if you don't feel safe and if you don't feel sexy because you're worried and someone's not going to respect that, I would question whether we really want to go there.
Yeah, that's very, very wise. It strikes me, Tanya, that given the role that you play, you have a ringside seat to men that most people never do in terms of the intimate thinking and intimacy about intimacy. What is it that you have learned over your career that, is not available in magazines or TV shows? It's just because of your whole professional career, you've learned X. What is X?
That's a big question. And I want to say too, it's such an honor to be able to speak to men at levels where they're vulnerable and they're sharing intimacy and they're sharing from the heart. It can take a while to get to that moment as well, because again, everybody's quite armored up because they're told you need to be this, you need to be that, you can't be failing. So to sort of get them to step out of the man box for a little while and just be, it requires trust. And setting up a place where people can be safe. So it's such an honor when people trust me with what's going on for them. The way we socialize men, it's extremely easy for them to behave badly and then judge them for that, right? So people are like, men only want sex, and they push and they shove and they bully to get things and they don't care. And I'm like, look behind that. So bring some curiosity to that behavior if you see it. What's going on there? Because you'll find 95% of the time there's somebody who's scared and anxious behind inappropriate behavior. So when people are bullying or sulking or being really loud or in a hurry to get to sex, they're often afraid. Like, people are in a hurry are like, I think I need to get to intercourse really fast because I'm worried that I might not keep my erection. So I'm going to go there. And their partner's like, what, dude, what are you doing? What about warming up and all of these things? So we don't take stock enough, I think, to see that people are afraid and people are anxious. And when we get to that, we can have some really profound and life-changing conversations.
I would imagine there is at least an initial sense of trepidation and maybe even shame about coming to a sex therapy appointment. If that's right, what is the shame about? And I imagine you help dissipate that pretty quickly and move on to somewhere else.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, I used to have an office in Surrey Hills in Sydney, and a friend of mine, I don't know why, she gave me all these sex toys to sell. So they were around my office, and so there were some riding crops. And the people who were nervous used to come in and kind of like edge around the perimeter of the room to the sofa. And I'd make a joke about the riding crops for people who were naughty. And they were like, oh my God. And I'm like, no, not really. Not really.
Yeah, you could lose customers very quickly that way.
I think I'm lucky to have the skill of language and making it easy for people to talk about things that they find difficult. So they're tense for about 5 minutes, and I'll notice it to them. I'm like, look, I think it's fabulous that you've come. Within about 5 minutes, you'll be taking a deep breath and realizing this is not so terrible, and you might even have some fun. But, I'm with you for this tricky 5 minutes while we relax into it, and I promise you all will be well. And it is. No one's ever stormed out. No one's ever said this is really terrible. Most people have been like, wow, I just learnt so much. And other folks, it takes a while. It's not just a one session wonder. It might take them a few to let go of everything that they've been holding so tight.
You carry the stories and the intimate life stories of so many people that you've met in your career. When you look back now, is there any individual or couple that jump to mind as, you're glad that they came to you because of what transpired as a result of the experience of coming into your clinic?
I do remember one couple that came to me and it was a mismatched libido thing, and I thought it was hilarious. He came to see me first and said, unless we have a threesome, our marriage has to end. And I was like, oh, right, wow, so can you break that down for me? And it turned out that they weren't having a lot of sex, and that he thought that would be like a savior to do something exciting and different. And then I spoke to her on her own, and she's like, oh my God, I'm so tired. I have a big job, and then I'm studying part-time, and we have 2 adult children living at home, and I do all the housework, and I've got a 1-hour commute to work each way. And my husband just sits there reading a book after dinner, waiting for me to be ready for sex. And I'm like, wow, okay. So it was a stressful start, and she didn't like talking about sex, so she got very emotional. But as we talked about things, we looked at things that we could do to make it easier to get to sex. So get a cleaner, help around the house a bit more, take some of the stress off. What are the good days of the week that would be good for connection, so that we're not sitting around waiting, reading, hoping? What things could you do that weren't a threesome, because she didn't want to do a threesome? Do you know what the compromise they came to was?
No.
Going out for pizza on a Friday night, having a glass of wine, and then reading each other erotic stories in bed. That's miles away from a threesome. And it was absolutely beautiful. They were so happy. But it took quite a lot of sessions to pull apart all of the about it, and to be really curious each time. Okay, what could get us closer to where we want to be? Yeah, because really it was about finding a way back to each other.
That's what strikes me as you're talking. There's obviously excitement and fantasy about a threesome, I'm imagining, given what you said, but actually it was all about reconnection and just finding their way of doing that. And I'm guessing this, so please correct me, that was new for them?
Yeah, they'd never done the erotic stories thing before. And I think just making time. I even think it was new for them to be a team around the house domestics and finding the time for sex, rather than hoping it would spontaneously bubble up in a relationship that was very busy and long term. So just teaching them, you actually can make this happen rather than hoping it will happen. There's a big difference in that.
Do you think this is a question that I know there's no right answer to, but I think it's a good question to ask? Given the separation and divorce rates at midlife are pretty high, do you think if folks were able to find simple ways like the couple you've just explained to reconnect, would that prevent some of those relationships from breaking up?
I do. I really do. So many people come to me and say, I love my partner, but I'm not in love with them. And I'm like, I really don't like that statement, because that feels to me like you're looking for the lust and the limerence period and that sort of horny feeling, and that's gone. And love to me is a decision. it's a decision to show up every day. Today, I'm going to show up. Today, I'm going to show up. Today, I'm going to show up. Right. So if you're feeling like you're not in love, what is that? Is it that you don't want to show up? Or is it that things aren't as easy as they used to be? And maybe I hadn't thought about collaborating with my partner to make things happen. Right. So I do think if there were more conversations had, if people could be brave. I have so many men come and see me going, I want to do this, but I daren't ask my wife because she'll divorce me. And I'm like, have you asked her? Because she might be shocked or she might say yes. Right? You don't know. It's that fear and the shame that really keeps people paralyzed.
And I imagine you also have wives saying to you the same thing.
Same thing. Sometimes it's such a shock for their husbands to hear that they really do want sex and they do want to be connected, because all they can see is what's not happening, and they don't see the internal machinations of, I'm really tired, I'm going to try tonight. Oh no, I'm really tired. How am I going to do this? And and what's sexy for them. So like there are things that we can do to connect that make it easier to jump into intimacy, rather than running in the door from a really busy day and then expecting each other to be very sexy vixens and jump onto the bed. That's hard. Yeah, works well in the beginning of relationships.
Yeah.
When we're older, it's not so easy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I turn the tables on you for a second, Tanya? I'm interested in how has all of this ringside seat and the pivotal role you play in people's intimacies and intimate lives, how has that fashioned you, or what's the impact that's had on you personally?
Ooh, that's a big question. I think I just think I've had the privilege to meet so many amazing educators and people and be alongside fellow folks in this industry that I've just met a lot of people. I'm an extremely inquisitive and non-judgmental person, which means you meet interesting folks when you're like that. And I think the folks that I've met have really helped me really see myself in a different view. Like I definitely got loving my body and feeling sexy and being embodied from all of the learning that I've done. I've also learnt that my body is an extremely intuitive tool and I should listen to it far more often than I do. So there's that part of the equation. And I just think being exposed and open to people from all different areas of the sexuality field has made me curious and also braver to try things, including conversations with people, and definitely a consent access activist. All of the teachings that I do, because I teach therapists how to talk about sex and how to work with this area because it's so difficult for many people. It's helped me be curious. It's helped me be kind. It's helped me be generous, but it's definitely opened things up. And I think I'm such everything that I offer is deeply informed by consent and inclusivity and wanting the world to be a better place through pleasure.
Again, what's wrong with that? What question have I not asked you that you think is really important for our audience to know?
I think it was more being what my mantra is, right? And I think my mantra in this case is about curiosity, kindness, and generosity, and exploring those. I actually think, and I say this to all my clients, that these 3 words will get you out of any tricky situation in a relationship. Domestic violence aside, I'll take that out. But if you're curious, you're going to learn a lot about your partner and your relationship and also yourself. And if you're kind and generous with what you learn, there are exponential capacities for you to change and grow and fold new things into your relationship and your life. I think it's that.
That's pretty cool. I've got 2 more questions for you. It's been fascinating conversation. I'm so glad you made time for us today. My second last question, which I ask everybody, is if you had access to the 75-year-old version of you, what would she be asking of you now?
I know. She'll be saying, did you write that book? Did you write that book?
I suspect
I'm
that
just
book is
at
a
the stage
bestseller,
of-
Tanya.
I've got so many people ask me to write a book, and I'm sort of on the cusp of retiring. So I've hit my crone and wisdom stage, and I'm doing a lot of teaching and lecturing. And I've also been tired, so it's like, oh, I need to write a book, and it'll be about pleasure and the importance of pleasure, and a lot about inclusivity and things like that. But also really tips on how to connect and how to relate, because I think we could all do with a hand in that department sometimes. We don't know everything.
Well, given everything you've told us today, I suspect that book will be much needed and much shared, I suspect, amongst people. Tanya, it's been a real pleasure having you today. Pardon the pun, not at all. It's been a real pleasure. Is there any final words of wisdom you'd like to share with our audience?
I don't know. I think it's remained curious. And I think every single conversation I have about sex and intimacy comes back to communication. So yes, it's hard. I'm reminded, I saw a program on TV years ago about sex education in the UK, and they had a bunch of 15-year-olds come into class, and the teacher said, after lunch, we're going to bring in some sexperts, and you can ask any question you want now, write it down, put it in the box, right? So they did. Kids very excited. And over the lunch break, they got their parents in. Right. And their parents were told the questions and they were given all the answers. So the kids came back in and they saw their parents and went, these are your sexperts. And they were just like, oh. They were literally shrinking under their desks. It was fascinating and funny. And then there was this like 45 to 60 seconds of real difficulty of the parents and the kids with the questions. And then all of a sudden, they were having these amazing conversations that I feel would be life-changing for all parties. So I think sometimes just push through that 45 seconds of discomfort because it will pay off. It will be worth it.
Well, it's been worthwhile having you today, Tanya. Thank you so much for joining our podcast.
It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. It would mean a lot to us if you subscribed or pressed like on whatever platform you're watching or listening to this podcast. And if you have any comments, please leave them. We read them all and they mean a lot to us. Feel free to share this episode with anyone that you think would like it. And in the meantime, don't let the old man in.